Hey guys, day 16, meaning we're halfway through now, and I want to congratulate you so far for getting to this point. And I want to start moving into some of these advanced concepts, as I mentioned, with nutrition in general, but even down to some very specific topics such as how to recover from a binge. And this might not have a lot of bearing for some people, but I know a lot of people who have dieted. In fact, I don't know if anybody has ever dieted without going off of their diet or experiencing what we call binge eating. It doesn't have to be binge eating disorder, but it can certainly get there if we're not careful. So I want to talk about, first of all, a little bit in terms of just binging as a principle and why it happens. First of all, if physiologically we're just not getting enough food, you're going to have low blood sugar episodes, you're going to have a lot of hunger, and maybe even just psychologically feeling deprived, and it becomes very easy to binge. Even the strongest person with that physiological pressure of literally starving, you're going to crack at some point. You just will. And I know me personally, when I've been dieting with the most stress, I had a goal that might have been even just too aggressive, not appropriate for what physiologically I could achieve. And the stress of knowing I was in that kind of a race against the clock, it became easier to crack. And so behaviors such as having a certain trigger food, maybe it was a dessert, sugary type things or peanut butter, and I would binge and I would think, well, now I can't do that anymore. I have to cross that off my list. But then it would be something else because the entire system of my diet was just flawed. It was too little food. Now, I will say that some people, like Dr. Corey Probst, the wellness director and vice president of the Diet Doc, would say that most of the time binging has nothing to do with food. And that context is more of binge eating disorder, which is how this is repetitious. Doesn't matter if you're starving or not, doesn't matter how much food you just had, you keep doing that as a behavior. And I would totally agree. There are those circumstances where it just is not food related. It's very behavioral, it's an emotional trigger. There are tools that might be kind of faulty psychologically that we use to compensate for other things, and now we use food in a different way just to soothe those psychological needs. So that's not what we're going to talk about. I'll leave that to Corey. What I want to talk about is the food factors, the more physiological, not psychological elements of binging. So first of all, if you're having an issue with that, you really have to make that distinction. You have to decide: is this coming because I'm just not eating enough? Something is wrong. Maybe I'm not eating enough meals. Maybe I've tried to put too much time in between my meals, and therefore I'm just not quite making it. I've had clients who, we might be on kind of a one increased calorie day, one day where we add food to get that metabolic surge, and yet this person needed two. They were just getting too hungry early in the week and couldn't make it to the weekend. So either we would have to increase their daily food or add kind of a second higher day in there. So there are different strategies to that. Really depends on your goals. We talked about this in an earlier episode, whether we would just add more food or add some kind of a second higher day. We'll reach that again when we talk about strategies toward the end of this series. But I wanted to make sure that we started with that as a concept definition. What binging is before we talk about what to do about it. Because if we don't know where it's coming from, it's probably not going to be very helpful to try and make corrections after the fact. We want to make sure we're preventing it, making sure you're healthy, that you have enough food physiologically, that if there are some learned behaviors that have become part of your emotional makeup, and binging or struggling with food isn't really food related, we certainly would recommend you get some help with that. Dr. Corey Probst, even if you just need a reference, kind of a referral for information or somebody to talk to about it, you can contact her through our website. But that is not a laughing matter. It certainly can be devastating. So definitely keep an eye up. Keep an eye on behavior like this. Any changes you see, any things that you're noticing, just pay attention to that. Very serious stuff. So let's say that you've actually gone through just a slip. You know, maybe it was even unplanned, and you just don't really have a history of it, but it happens. You know, it's a holiday or something, or you just got a little crazy. You were with friends, and you just had way too much to eat. Now, I'm not calling a binge having an extra 3 potato chips or something like that, or just going over on your food intake goals by 50 calories or 20 grams of carbs. That's not a binge. A binge is just reckless abandon, eating tons of food, and you're sick to your stomach. You don't know what to do. You know the scale is not going to be your friend the next day, and you feel like you've blown your diet. Then what do? First of all, keep that mindset of objectivity. Don't become pulled under by that emotional languishing, you know, self-loathing and all that. Just say, okay, this happened. I know it's not normal for me, and so how are we going to fix it? So number one, that kind of objectivity really helps. First of all, now you do have a lot of extra food, right? You probably refilled some stored carbohydrate levels, and you're going to be back to the starting point perhaps on that metabolic positioning continuum, and you just have to recognize that and say, okay, this is my bed. I have to lie in it by just getting back on track, and I know in 2 or 3 or 4 days I'm going to be back where I was, and then the next couple days I'm going to be making up some ground. So there is a chance if it was a 1 episode kind of binge, that's, you know, by the end of the week you say, wow, it didn't even have an effect. If you remember the study I quoted where with an increase in carbohydrates over a span of a week, a pretty substantial increase, you know, more than 5,000 calories from carbs, subjects didn't gain more than 6 or 7 or 8% of those calories in actual converted body fat. Because sometimes that surge of increased food increases metabolism from that direct thermic effect of food. Could even be not just so acute, but a little chronic increase in your metabolism, because with all those extra stored carbs, your body's ramped up. And so you might find that by the end of that week, without making any other changes, you didn't really lose any ground. That's why staying objective is very helpful. So another thing is, now that your carb levels are full in your body, you probably restored a little bit of body fat. What if you did go to the kind of low end of your macronutrient goals for the next couple days? Could you accelerate your repositioning on that metabolic continuum? And I would say absolutely. You don't want to get in the habit of punishing yourself, certainly. You don't want to say, well, I binged, so I'm not going to eat for 12 hours, or I'm not going to eat for 2 days. You know, don't do that. You're gonna end up probably then creating more than, you know, 1 episode. You're gonna get into a habit of binging and purging and that kind of thing, even just through calorie restriction purging. So not a good idea. Just do something smart, which may be skipping that next meal, maybe the next day reducing a little bit, but then back on track. Just like any other day, you need to stay ahead of hunger. So whether there was a reason or not for that binge, you don't want it to create a cycle that keeps undulating you back into that pattern. So again, you know, make up for it in a little bit of perhaps, you know, reducing calories for the next day or so, or even just that next meal that day, and maybe a little bit of extra exercise activity. One of the things that can be beneficial is before that food is actually utilized, it can, as I said, stimulate that metabolism. You can go have a much better training workout. That's taking advantage. That's using the silver lining of an otherwise potentially negative occurrence. Is that, man, now I got all this extra food, I'm gonna have my best workout of the week, and you'll probably feel that. You'll feel that surge of strength and so forth. So, you know, that would be the thing that I would consider is go through all of those factors. Just use it to your advantage, and don't beat yourself up over it. Just go right back onto your normal routine there. So thanks, guys, and we'll be checking with you here on the next episode, getting into some really cool advanced topics.